We're going to be using the machine today on a piece of paper. So firstly, position your sewing machine safely on the table. If you've got a hand machine, then you'll be using it manually at the side, and on the floor there is a foot that will control your pace and execution of actually stitching with the electric machine. So most of you will be familiar with types of stitching which you will see on the garments that you wear. So first of all, you place, it could be, and I'm using paper, it could be fabric, it could be anything under the machine, safely. The threads are out of the back, the foot is lifted, which you will have a lever usually at the back to lift the foot. You don't force your material, or in this case paper. This will secure once you put the foot down, and then if you just manually put the needle in, so it's secure and you can actually leave your hands away from it. You do not press your foot at any stage, don't even have it hovering over the foot on the floor. So with both hands you keep away from the needle, but they do need to support the material that you've got under your machine. So your left hand is the closest to the needle and the foot, and your right hand is the one that will guide it and hold it, but in this case it's quite a small piece of paper, so it should be fine. So for now I'm going to press the foot and I'm going to sew on this paper. With the paper I'm not going to back stitch to secure it because it could make a hole in the paper, but this is the only material you've probably got at home to stitch on. So if you were stitching on a photograph it would be similar to this. So I could do a straight line now. I'm probably going too fast, but at least you could go at a slower pace. And some machines will actually go slower for you. You can slow them down. So when you stop, if your needle is upwards, put the needle back in, because I'm actually going to continue. You lift your foot, you don't yank the paper round, you then turn it, put the foot round, and I'm going to change the stitch. When you change the stitch on the dial, you must have your foot up, otherwise you will again damage the needle, damage the sewing bed. So I'm going to do another stitch that you may be familiar with. There's 3 dials on here, different spaces between the actual stitches. So the first one will be the widest. I'm doing that quite quickly, and I'm going to change it again, lift the needle up, change it to the, I'm going to do it to the more condensed lines together, and put the needle back down, ready to sew again. Now with this one, the end product will be a much tighter stitch, but the problem being with that, it may rip your paper. So I'd keep to a looser, wider stitch in the middle. Then I'm going to change it to anything I fancy actually on here. So let's go to this one. So you can play around as long as your parents let you use that machine. Again, I'm just going to turn a corner here. This is the end product so far. So I'm just practicing on that, and I'm going to change the stitch again. Remember, lift the needle up and then adjust your stitch. So you don't have to do a plain stitch. If you're going round the corner you can slow down. Obviously I'm doing it at pace, but you can manipulate it. Right hand, left hand, keep your fingers away from the needle. So you'd be following lines. I'm just going to leave the needle in, foot up, and I'm going to change the stitch again, which I put the needle up. So genuine, from this video you should be then able to use your machine at home if you've got one. So once you've finished, you lift the foot, and then I adjust the needle up and down to see whether the thread will come out. If it's tight, you don't yank it. If you gradually move the needle, then that thread would come from behind. You always take your work, or fabric really normally, you take it from the back and then you can pull your threads. Then you can cut your threads off halfway, leaving the rest of the thread at the back of the machine. So at this stage, take your foot away from your sewing foot so that there's no mistake that can happen. So then you always place your threads back through, ready for the next one. Okay, so you can just leave the foot down for now, and then you have some stitches that you can play around with. So this is your normal one, and you can actually do longer ones if you wanted to. So that is changing the stitch length. So you could just play around on the machine to see what stitch you'd need. That foot needs to be very comfortable position, not miles away from you. It's a bit like when you're rollering and you haven't got your ink plate miles away. So I've got my needle in, so I need it up, and I'm going to just change it back to a longer stitch, and on here it should be able to, I should be able to adjust that so it's a longer stitch, which I'll go to 9, 10. So you've got a very small stitch there and a much longer one there. Some machines do even longer, more of a basting stitch. Okay.